Hello, good evening, good day, everyone. So, this is the weekly episode of This Week in Tech. It is March 21st, 2024. I think I'm going to start every episode from now on saying what day it is, and because this is becoming a series. So, if you're new to this, if you're watching this for the first time, welcome to the channel. We're going to go over not a whole lot. This is probably going to be one of the shorter episodes of the week because we don't have a lot of technology stuff to talk about. Unless you're someone who's into AI, there was a lot of AI stuff that happened at GTC this week. GTC, for those that don't know, is the graphics technology conference hosted by NVIDIA. So it's kind of like their main industry trade show, if you will, in terms of they do it once a year. It's typically every March. And it's a lot of developers. They get together, they go and attend the show, and they learn kind of NVIDIA's vision of where the industry is going. So, what was interesting from GTC, we learned about NVIDIA's next generation RTX and AI GPU. So, Blackwell was announced at the show, but for those of you that are enthusiasts on the PC gaming side, it's not really the news that you're looking for. Most of what they talked about was all for the AI and the enterprise market. So Blackwell, it's going to be the successor to the Hopper chip that they have right now, although it's only going to be available later this year. And it's going to be very expensive. So, yeah, not a whole lot of interesting things if you're someone who is just looking for a regular GPU. Hey, Nicholas, you missed the GTC first hour. Fully missed Blackwell announcement at the event. Well, you can always go and watch the replay. It's honestly, it wasn't really that interesting. I mean, there was a bunch of stuff with robotics in the last part of it that was kind of interesting. I mean, they're doing a lot of interesting things, leveraging machine learning. They were talking about developing new, using machine learning to come up with new drugs. Like, for example, one of the things that they talked about was antibiotics and how, with the current antibiotic technology, bacteria is becoming more and more resistant to the antibiotics that exist today. But with machine learning, I guess I should say AI, but you hear the word AI used so much now. I just don't like using AI as the terminology. But they use AI, ML, whatever you want to call it, to essentially create new future drugs. So like new antibiotics that are not resistant to, or that bacteria is not resistant to. That's some of the things they're doing on the medical side. So it was overall, it was interesting. It's nice to see what they're doing in fields that are outside of your typical tech IT world, stuff like, because that's the sort of thing that I feel has lagged behind in terms of technology advancements. I feel like the medical industry is severely lacking in terms of advancements. And machine learning is something that can be applied to a lot of different fields, a lot of different disciplines with very great effect. So that was interesting to see. Obviously the whole self-driving car stuff, they talked a little bit about that, or they at least showed some of it in the footage. But it's, most of what I have seen with all this push to get AI out into the market, it's all mostly language learning. Like, it's large learning models or LLMs. I mean, there's this new terminology called RAG. I'm trying to remember what it stands for, but basically it's kind of the guardrail system to prevent these hallucinations that the AI model can kind of run with because it's not constantly up to date. So there is an effort to try to fix that problem, because that was something that was very apparent with the early days of ChatGPT. Because I remember when I first started using ChatGPT, I remember it would come up with these grandiose hallucinations, and it was completely wrong, but boy did it write in such a way that it sounded convincing, so that if someone didn't really know the material and the subject matter, they could actually be fooled by ChatGPT. So, I mean, I've tested it on a couple of very technical things just to see the limits of what it knows, and nowadays it'll tell you that it'll if it doesn't really know how to answer you, it'll basically give you this generic answer saying that its current database is up to, and then it'll put the date in terms of how far or how updated it is. So retrieval augmented generation, yeah, that's it, RAG. So that's cool, because that was something that was news to me. I did not know about that until this week. I literally only learned about that this week. So that was one of the things that I got out of the GTC stuff that they were showing off at the show. All you ended up seeing live was the Omniverse. Yeah, and a lot of that isn't really that new. I mean, they always try to show Omniverse because they're trying to build the ecosystem. They're trying to push the ecosystem, their walled garden, and their tools to more developers. So they're always going to mention Omniverse. Perplexity, because it has online access. Yeah, but sometimes, I don't know, like, sometimes it'll pull the wrong stuff too. That's the only problem with the online. Although I do think it's better to have that than to have nothing and then to just have it hallucinate. You know, so it's kind of like the lesser of two evils, if you will. I mean, that's the way I look at it. So this first story here, next-gen RTX and AI GPU IP incorporated within MediaTek's upcoming Dimensity SoCs. So, yeah, NVIDIA's hardware is going to end up in a lot of different things. Like, they're really, really branching out. And the thing is, they're growing at such a rapid pace that they're going to have to become a larger company, which means they're going to have to hire a lot more people. I don't really see them staying at the current size. And sure enough, they have money to invest in hiring more people, building up more business units. Because the thing is, like, if they stay as they are, they're not going to be able to address the entire market that they want to be in all these different industries. It's not going to work. So what that means is they're going to have to pick and choose based off of the estimated TAM, like where they're going to allocate their resources, like their engineering resources, their sales resources. So I feel like they're probably going to not focus too heavily on the gaming market in the near future, because everything that I've seen from NVIDIA is really pushing a lot of like other industry stuff. Like they're talking about medical a lot. They're talking about things that they don't normally talk about or they don't normally exist in. So like they're really going heavily into like not the data center, because they're already in the data center, but the outside the data center. So like the backhaul, the internet, the telcos, like that, the network side, that's where they're really trying to push. That plus all this other stuff like medical and the arts and things that they've also been in for a while now, but they're able to leverage ML in so many different industries now that I feel like their gaming is kind of like it's moving lower on the totem pole in terms of their overall priority list. Let's put it that way. The die of Blackwell was massive and wasn't a chip. Yes, it was a huge die. A huge die. So, let me see if I can find it. But these were just 10 years away from AI generating every pixel in a game in real time. Yeah, there was a picture of it. And because it was like on Monday, it's kind of like further out in the news now. But yeah, it's a huge die. The Blackwell flagship. But that's the AI stuff. That won't be in gaming, though. It's becoming a lower priority for them. So, the gaming market is kind of... I don't want to say it's going to stagnate, but the thing is, I don't expect to see anything really new or game-breaking in terms of new innovation in graphics technology. I think where we're going to expect to see these newer things are going to actually have to come from the game engine developers. So Epic Games and people who make game engines. So Unity, Epic, the companies who have their own proprietary engines like the Frostbite engine, the one that Sony uses for all their first party titles, the one that Horizon Forbidden West, I forgot what it's called, the Decima engine. You know, like the game engine developers are going to be the ones that are going to have to probably innovate in terms of graphics technology, because I don't think we can leave it up to Nvidia to do it anymore, because they're getting pulled in so many different directions that I don't think they're going to be the ones that are going to introduce the next big thing in terms of gaming graphics technology. I expect somebody else to take over that role. AI market is booming and gaming will always be their fallback. Yeah, they're not going to get rid of the gaming market, or they're not going to exit the gaming market. The people who say that Nvidia is going to abandon gaming, like, those people are very out of touch with reality, because they don't look at it from the lens of risk mitigation strategies and those sort of things. Like, if AI just goes bottom up and that market crashes for whatever reason, I'm not saying it's going to crash, but I can certainly see it slowing down and no longer being the big thing that everyone in their dog is talking about. So, yeah, they're not going to abandon gaming, because that's still a huge market and it's still a growing market. So there's no reason to do that. That will be foolish, considering the amount of IP that they have in that space and how much effort they've put into the gaming market. AMD's already being included in Exynos chips. Yeah, AMD's going to continue to do their own thing. Like, obviously, both companies have AI hardware, and that's kind of the reason why both of them are kind of the two main drivers of the industry right now. Although Nvidia, because of all of the software stuff that they have, they're definitely kind of like the gold standard, and then AMD's like that silver backup, second supplier. And then we have all the system integrators that are trying to partner with these companies just to resell their stuff and get their names out there. So there's also this huge thing. So the kind of the war between Nvidia and the big tech companies, like, when I say tech companies, I mean network, IT, hardware manufacturing companies. So that would be like Cisco, Juniper, Dell, HPE, Arista, basically anyone who manufactures Ethernet switches and routers. Those people were at war with Nvidia for the past 2 years now. But it looks like that war is kind of ending. Nvidia has conceded for the most part. For those that don't know what I'm talking about the war between Ethernet versus InfiniBand. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry, because that war is kind of over now. It's pretty safe to say that Ethernet won, like hands down won. So Nvidia basically lost. And now what we're seeing is Nvidia waved the white flag and now is partnering with all these guys to get their chips into these devices that will still be Ethernet focused, because it makes a ton of sense, guys. We talked about this in a previous stream a few months ago. This is like a repeat of Blu-ray versus HD DVD, where Ethernet equals Blu-ray and HD DVD equals InfiniBand. And that's basically what happened. NVIDIA was HD DVD, aka like Microsoft with the Xbox, and everybody else that I just mentioned is Blu-ray, which is basically like Sony's PlayStation 3 from back in the day. So obviously everybody's going to win, and the one guy singled out is going to lose. So now they're kind of just partnering with everybody, and Ethernet's going to continue to be the standard because Ethernet's been around forever, and there's no reason to change from that. You're talking about a significant like rip and replace, and nobody in the right mind is going to do that. So, yeah. So that was GTC. A lot of stuff about AI. Blackwell was announced. We are going to see new graphics cards from NVIDIA in the consumer market in Q4 of this year. It will happen, as expected. I've been saying this since about a year ago now, and I was right all along. So AMD is already being included, yes. So I guess moving on from that, the only thing that I want to talk about besides GTC, which we already talked about, was Dragon's Dogma 2 performance. Because Dragon's Dogma 2 is available to play now, and that's why this stream is probably going to be a very short one, because I want to go and play Dragon's Dogma 2. I'm trying to finish Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I'm very close to the end of that game now. I think I have probably 3 hours left in the game. I'm in chapter 13, and there's 14 chapters total, and I'm like almost at the end of chapter 13, as far as I'm assuming. So, Dragon's Dogma 2, I wanted to finish Final Fantasy before Dragon's Dogma 2 came out. Unfortunately, I didn't make it in time, but I'm very, very close to finishing that game. I don't want it to get to a scenario where Final Fantasy VII never gets completed because my gaming time goes to other games like Dragon's Dogma. Although I don't even know if I'm really going to like Dragon's Dogma because I never played the first game. I'm just going off of the hype train. So I don't know. I might get burned for that. It might not be the type of game that I enjoy, but we'll see. I think I'm going to like this game. But there is a article by PC Gamer talking about how the game performs. Dragon's Dogma 2, the headline says, it'll take everything your PC has and still want more. This game is going to go down in the history of this year as the most CPU-bound game you will ever play. This is going to dethrone Star Wars Jedi Survivor as the most CPU-bound game. So for those that caught my live stream yesterday, because I was streaming Final Fantasy VII yesterday, this will kind of sound like a repeat for you, because it's basically, we talked about this exact story yesterday, and we're going to talk about it again. For those that are tuning in for the weekly show, from what you know, Dragon's Dogma is companion-focused. Well, I mean, that's one aspect of it. There's a lot about it. There's a lot to the game. But yeah, let's get into it here. So this article tested these CPUs. Now, one thing I will say, the GPU is very important, but the CPU that you have is actually way more important than your GPU in this game. Like, as long as you have a GPU that is appropriately sized for the resolution of your monitor, you're going to be fine in terms of graphics power. The bottleneck is going to be the CPU. And here is what they tested. So they tested with an AMD Ryzen 7 8700G. So that's the newest Ryzen architecture available today, although this is an APU. So keep in mind, this is technically a laptop CPU. With 32 gigabytes of DDR5 6400, and they also tested with an older Zen 3 based. So they have Zen 4.5, they have Zen 3, which is, this is a 2020 processor. So this processor is like 3.5 years old. So it's kind of old, it's getting long in the tooth, but it's still pretty good. So 16 gigs of DDR4 3200 megahertz, or 3200 megatransfers. So this is DDR4, and this one's DDR5. Then they have a Zen 4-based desktop part. But the funny thing about this is the, 65-watt save electricity, go green Ryzen processor. So this one only does, 65 watts stock. And it's a 12-core, 24-thread. So it's got a lot of threads. But it's very low wattage. So 32 gigs at 6400 again. And then they have two Intel CPUs. So I like these choices, actually, for the Intel CPUs. They choose two different i7s. So they choose a old Intel i9 9700K. So this processor was new in the year 2018. So this is from 2018. This is a pretty old processor. Let me make sure it's 2018. Am I right? Because 2017 was Cabby and Coffee. So yeah, this one was 2018. This was like second half of 2018 when this processor came out. So it's a pretty old Intel processor. One thing that's notable about this, though, and I like the reason why they included this one. This one, even though it's an i7, it's an i7 that does not have hyperthreading, which means it is an 8-core, 8-thread. So it's not an 8-core, 16-thread. It's an 8-core, 8-thread. They can only handle one thread per core. So we're going to see like how multi-threaded this game is. Oh, October 19, 2018. Okay, I got it right. Good, I got it right. Because I kind of guessed, and I was like, let me make sure I got that right. Okay, I'm just going to say 2018 second half. October is in the second half of 2018, so I got it right. All right, so 32 gigs, DDR4. And then the newest processor that they're testing here for desktop is this is a 8-core, 8P core, 12E core, but the P cores have hyperthreading, so it's like 16 plus 12. So this is a 28 thread processor with DDR5 RAM. So let's see how. Okay, and then for the GPUs, I also like the choice of GPUs that they tested. So they tested the integrated graphics of the APU. So that's a 780M. So this would be like if someone was to play this on a really good laptop that had the best integrated graphics solution today. They're going to show what that experience would be like. And then they have, for the discrete graphics cards, they have a Radeon 7800 XT. So that's a pretty good one. That's a 1440p graphics card. Then they have an RX 6600. This is like a 1080p graphics card. It's kind of old, but it's still decent. It's a very budget graphics card. Then they have an Intel Arc A770. This is a 16 gigabyte, assuming that's the model that they have. It's technically, it could be a 1440p, but it underperforms so badly at that resolution that it's kind of a 1080p graphics card. Pretty much it's a 1080p graphics card. And then they have a GeForce RTX 4070. So this one is similar. It's a little bit weaker than the 7800 XT. It has less VRAM. It's like 12 gigs, whereas this one's 16. But this is also a 1440p graphics card. And then they have a 4070 Ti to be the strongest GPU that they test with. This one is that weird. It's like, it's a 1440p card, but it's like way too much money for 1440p as far as I'm concerned. So that's basically what they're using. All right, so they did 16 hours of benchmarking. So let's get into the results. So 1080p. Now keep in mind, RT is off because it's RE engine, so its RT is actually kind of pointless. And then interlaced mode, which means the 1920 number is actually half width for the pixel render. So it's kind of like it's rendering 1080p at a lower than the full 1920 by 1080 resolution. They're still doing 1080 on the vertical, but the horizontal pixels are actually, I think it's like half. So it's interlaced instead of progressive scan, which is kind of weird. But the reason why they're able to do this is because Capcom's RE engine, it just, for some reason, it was built with the ability to do interlaced and progressive rendering. So it's kind of unique in that regard because not a lot of game engines can do interlaced rendering anymore. So, but the reason why they're testing this way is because the consoles will run the game using interlaced rendering, and there's no way to undo that. So if you're playing this on a PS5 or a Series X or Series S, you're going to be running the game in interlace, regardless of what resolution your TV or your monitor is. So here are the results. So as expected, the 4070 Ti, which is the most expensive graphics card, performs the best. But what I like is they show you what happens when they vary the CPU with some of these results. So to use the second one as an example, so the 7900X plus the 7800 XT does 88 frames per second, 60 on the 1% low. But if you look at the exact same graphics card, so down here, they tested with the 7800 XT with a Ryzen 5 5600X. This is a Zen 3 based processor. It only did 58. So that's a massive drop. We're talking like 88 FPS all the way down to 58 FPS. That's a 30 FPS difference just by changing the graph or just by changing the CPU. So that shows you what a CPU bottleneck does. So even if you have a brand new graphics card, if you have an older CPU, in certain games like Dragon's Dogma 2, for instance, you're not going to be getting the best performance that your graphics card is capable of because your CPU is limiting you. It's basically a CPU bottleneck. This is the definition of a CPU bottleneck. Pretty reasonable CPU from like 3.5 years ago. Yeah, I mean, it's still good, but the thing is, this game is starting to show what happens when the game is designed in such a way that the number of threads your CPU has actually results in better performance. So, like, for example, this i7-14700K, this is a 28 thread, and this 7900X is a 24 thread. Now, there's a couple of different things to take into account here. The i7 uses way more power and will boost much, much higher than this because this is the Ryzen 9 7900. Well, actually, they're saying X. Actually, I don't know if that's a typo because they listed the non-X, which is a 65 watt TDP, which means it doesn't clock nearly as high as the X model. So I kind of think this is a typo. I don't think there's supposed to be an X there. This is supposed to be a non-X. So this is a 65 watt TDP, 24 thread. It's kind of power limited out of the box. So technically Zen 4 could do better, but it's still a massive jump from like a 12 thread, right? Like doubling your threads plus the fact that we're going from Zen 3 to Zen 4 results in a significant improvement because look, same graphics card, but we're going from a minimum of 36 all the way up to 60, and we're going from an average of 58 to 88 with the exact same graphics card. So that shows the difference between a higher thread count CPU and a newer CPU architecture. So, and there's also the difference of DDR4 versus DDR5 because Zen 3 is on DDR4, Zen 4 is on DDR5. So that's another thing. You can see that the GPU doesn't make too much of a difference because if you look at let's look at two Intel CPUs. So here we have a modern 14700K, but then down here we have an i7 9700K. So look, this old Intel is doing 63 with the 4070 Ti. So that is a severe bottleneck on the 4070 Ti because the 4070 Ti, it's like, okay, yeah, it's technically above 60 with this old Intel CPU, but with this new Intel CPU, look at how much faster it is. And now here's the other thing I want to point out. Here's the thing that is the most interesting thing. Look at the minimum. Look at the 1% low on the i7 9700K. The minimum 1% low is 24 frames per second. That is really bad. In fact, do you see how big of a CPU bottleneck this is? Look at this. We have a 4070 Ti losing to a 4070 and a 7800 XT. When you pair a more expensive, more powerful graphics card with an older CPU, you're getting worse minimums and worse averages than a less expensive. Look at this. The non-Ti is outperforming the Ti. And then if we change the CPU to an even more modern CPU, the 7800 XT is curb stomping both of them. at almost 90 FPS, and the 1% is at 60, on this 65 watt Zen 4. So that shows like how CPU bound this game is. Like, this game is very CPU bound. I hope that is very apparent just by looking at this result here. This has the most powerful graphics card that they tested with, and it's giving the worst minimum out of all the discrete GPUs that are tested, with the one exception being this one down here. And we're gonna explain why that one performs the way it does, because there's a reason why that one performs the way it does. So again, so we kind of looked at Zen 3 versus Zen 4. We looked at old Intel versus new Intel. We looked at how a cheaper graphics card can beat a more expensive graphics card because it has a better CPU. 5600X is better than the 9700K, and even with so much so that with a weaker GPU, it's still better than a more expensive GPU. So looking at Intel, so the A770 is doing a lot better than the RX 6600. And the reason why that is happening is because the 6600 only has 8 gigabytes of VRAM. And this article talks about how even at 1080p, this game is maxing out 8 gigs of VRAM. So that's the reason why the minimum is so bad on the 6600, because it's running at VRAM limits, so it's stalling and using system RAM, and that's the reason why the minimums are so bad. And that's also what's pulling down the average, because I would expect the 6600 to be actually a lot more similar to the A770. The only reason why the A770 doesn't have a problem is because it has 16 gigabytes of VRAM. So, and then here's how the APU performs, for those that were curious. So the APU, 19 FPS at 1080p. Keep in mind, this is max settings. Max 1080p. So yeah, this would have to rely on lowering graphics settings if you wanted to get to that 30 FPS average if you're on integrated graphics. On battery power though, so keep that in mind. Yeah, that is definitely a laptop. That's why I don't game on laptops. That's why I don't buy gaming laptops. Although this doesn't have to be a gaming laptop. This can literally be like a thin and light. This could literally be somebody's work laptop. And the work laptop could technically run the game. If you turn it down to medium, it's probably at like 30 FPS. So imagine if the 5600 was paired with the 4090. It would probably only do like 75 FPS, I'm guessing. The 4090 would just pull it up to 75. That's about as high as I think it would go. Because look, 4070 is doing 68 on the CPU. So I'm thinking 4090 would pull it to like 75, probably close to 80 maybe. But yeah, we're talking like massive CPU bottleneck. All right, so now let's look at 1440p. So let's see what happens as you go up in resolution. Does the GPU make more of a difference? Well, technically, the narrative doesn't actually change. So if you look at 1440p, the 4070 Ti still loses to the regular 4070 when it's paired, it's kneecapped with this Intel i9 9700K versus a Ryzen 5 5600X. So it's so funny seeing an RTX 4070 winning against its bigger brother in both minimums and averages. That's so funny to see. That screams CPU bottleneck. Like, that is straight up CPU bottleneck galore. The RE engine has strange VRAM. Yeah, it does, man. Man, this thing maxes, like 1080p is maxing 8 gigs of VRAM in this game. Like, that's the reason why the 6600 is doing so bad. This article talks about that right here. Even at 1080p with maximum graphics, the VRAM load was too much for the 8 gigabyte Radeon 6600. the menu does warn you that you've gone over the limit. So yeah, see, so this is clearly the death of 8 GB graphics cards. Even at 1080p, we've gotten to the point where certain games, like Dragon's Dogma 2, use so much VRAM that even when you're at that puny resolution of 1080p, it still exceeds 8 gigs of VRAM. All right. 1440p, nothing really changes, so everything just kind of like gets taxed, if you will. So it's like everything like drops a little bit, but nothing really changes. So it's like the 4070 Ti with a 28 thread modern CPU still does the best. A 24 thread 65 watt, because this is a typo. This is actually a 65 watt non-X part. If you read the test setup in the thing, it tells you that. This one is doing 73 FPS. So out of all of them, the top two seem like balanced systems to me. Like these two seem balanced. Like I can totally like what's interesting about the selection of GPUs and CPUs for this test is that I feel like whoever reviewed this or whoever did these benchmarks, they were kind of trying to think like, okay, what is a typical gamer going to have in their pre-built or their relatively like 3-year-old computer or whatever, right? Like if they got a 3-year-old computer, it's probably like a Zen 3. Or if there's someone who hasn't upgraded in a really long time, they're probably on an old Intel i7. That's basically what these middle systems here all show. Man, they did a lot of tests with the 5600X though. Like, and that's supposed to be indicative of how many people are still on AM4. Could you change from open world? Oh yeah, let's take a look at that. So actually, hold on. Let's look at what happens in 1080p. So this is the open world, guys. So this is where the GPU is able to exercise as much rendering power as possible. Now let's go look at what happens when you go into a city where it becomes CPU bound. Now it's even more CPU bound. Check this out. Look at this. Now check this out. So here we were, up here, the Intel Raptor Lake is doing like 93. Oh, it's nice and smooth. And then all of a sudden, bam, you go into the city, check it out, 33 FPS. 33 FPS, man. 33 FPS with the 4070 Ti. 29 FPS with a 7800 XT. 19 FPS with this thing. So it's like, man, this is like CPU bottleneck city right here. They call it Vernworth City. This is more like CPU bound city. That they should rename the city. So now it's even more CPU bottleneck. Look at this. The 4070 Ti, the 4070, the 7800 XT, they're all like within 3 FPS of each other. Regardless of what the CPU is. Well, two of them are on the same CPU. That's hilarious. 70. Oh yeah, and remember, this isn't even like pure 1080p. This isn't even pure 1080p. This is interlaced 1080p. So this is like half width on the horizontal resolution. So it isn't even like full 1080p. And this is the performance. So now we are seeing the true power of the RE engine. This is the RE engine going Super Saiyan 3, 100% of its true power, and it brings all these GPUs and CPUs to their knees. They cannot escape that spirit bomb. The no poor city. Yes, we need an i7 for each NPC on the city. Yeah, man, 70 FPS at 1080p interlace. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Yeah, well, I'm gonna be playing the game. We will be live streaming the game tomorrow, by the way. I might even stream tonight. After this episode, I might actually show you guys Dragon's Dogma. I already have the game downloaded and everything. I've been trying to finish Final Fantasy VII. I'm actually very close to finishing Final Fantasy VII now. I did play a bunch of it off stream. So, yeah. So 1440p, here we go. In the city, So check this out. 1080p, everything is kind of like 40 average here with the Zen 3 CPUs. And now it's still kind of the same. It's like 38, 39. So it's like the number didn't really change too much. So, and it's a higher resolution. So that kind of shows you the effects of the CPU bottleneck. Look at how the top two dropped so much. These top two were doing really good. It's like these guys were like way up here. Then they just go way down there. Whereas the weak stuff down here already was struggling, like, and then you go here and they're like, oh, okay. And then, you know what's funny? The integrated graphics doesn't actually change that much. So that tells me that it's not really CPU bound, it's basically GPU bound. All right, and then finally 4K. So this is the one that I'm the most interested in because I'm going to be live streaming this game in 4K native resolution, everything maxed out, except for ray tracing because ray tracing is pointless on RE Engine. So, I might turn on ray tracing just to see what it looks like, but if it's just as stupid as how it looked in Forspoken, I'm just gonna turn it off instantly. Because I think, did they talk about? I don't think they tested RT, but what I've seen, someone else tested RT and they said that RT doesn't do anything visually and it reduces your FPS by like 20%. So it's like, as soon as I heard that, and they were testing with a 4090, and I was like, okay, yeah, no. no, we're not going to do RT. The game already has too many issues with like CPU bottlenecks. We're not going to try to introduce another bottleneck. So 4K, here we go, 4K. The most expensive system is able to do 62 FPS average with a 50 FPS 1% low in the open world. That's actually not that bad. I'm going to say that result is not that bad, considering that the 4070 Ti it's like a wannabe 4K GPU, but it's kind of too expensive to be a 1440p graphics card. So it's that weird GPU that I would never recommend because it doesn't have enough VRAM for how much it's priced at, and you can do better for 1440p. But the card is really just a 1440p graphics card that's just too expensive. So, but anyway, the fact that it can do 62 FPS at 4K is pretty respectable considering how hard this game is to run. So, but this to me proves that this game is not very GPU intensive. It's definitely a CPU heavy game. If we look at the Venworth City, look at what happens. The 1% lows are what changes here. Because notice how... Okay, see, this first one. Let's pay attention to the first one. So the 4070 Ti is averaging 62 in the open world, 36 minimum. We go... Oh, actually, I take that back. 62 open world, 50 minimum. In the city, same average, 62. But 36 minimum. So that means that 62 is the GPU limit at 4K. So we are GPU bound most of the time at 4K for this GPU. Now let's look at a weaker GPU. Let's look at the 7800 XT. This is like the second strongest GPU because it would go 4070 Ti followed by 7800 XT followed by 4070. So now, if you look at the 7800 XT, 55 in the open world, and then in the city it actually does 56, but the minimum's worse. So again, we're seeing the limits of the GPU. So this resolution is high enough, even though it's interlaced, it's still a high enough resolution where you're seeing as far as these GPUs can go. I mean, maybe if the 7800 XT was paired up with the i7, it might squeeze out maybe like 2 more frames or something. But I really think we're seeing the limits of the rasterization performance of these GPUs. Now, if we look at let's look at the A770. Let's look at Intel. Intel's doing, in the open world, 28 frames per second with a 20 minimum. And then it doesn't really change. So again, it looks like this one's GPU bound. But if we look at an older CPU with the 7800 XT, in the open world, it is doing 43. In the city, it does 37. So that would indicate that that the Zen 3 CPU, at least the Ryzen 5 with only 6 cores and 12 threads, is still CPU bottlenecking the 7800 XT. It's pretty apparent when you look at the second result, because this is the same GPU with a newer CPU performing significantly better at 4K versus here. So yeah, even at 4K, this game is super CPU bound. Like I said at the beginning of the stream, when we first started talking about Dragon's Dogma, I said that this game is going to go down in history as one of the most CPU bound single-player games of all time. This is dethroning Jedi Survivor as the new CPU-bound king of gaming. 40, did they test with... Okay, so unfortunately they didn't test different CPUs with 4070, because I wanted to see how 4070 scaled. But you can see, like, 4070 and the 7800 XT with the exact same CPU at 4K, they're both performing pretty much the same. You know, like the 7800 XT is doing 1 FPS better on the minimum, but I think at this point both of them are hitting their rasterization limit. So it'll be interesting to see how much VRAM this game uses at 4K, because the article claims that at 1080 it's already pulling like over 8 gigs of VRAM. So I don't even want to think like how much VRAM it requires at 4K. It's probably, well, it's probably, I would say maybe 10 to 11 gigs, because the 4070 has 12 and so does the 4070 Ti, and the 4070 Ti is still able to go above 60. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that works. But this game is so CPU bound. Then they did upscaling, which I don't really... This is weird. These results don't make any sense because the... Oh, actually they do make sense. So this one... these are 4070 results. These have got to be 4070 results. 1080i? Yeah, I know. Yeah. All right, and then they did test the upscaling, although I don't think this is... Since this is a still screenshot, I don't think this is a good reference for comparing the upscalers. So here we have native. This is... what resolution was this? Oh, okay, this is 4K with quality... Quality? I don't know. Anyway, this is the no upscaling. This is native res. This is FSR 3 balanced. This is DLSS balanced. Now, obviously, when you start looking at balance, not quality, they're both going to have a little bit of blur. And they even say that. They said that even with DLSS or FSR, they do not boost the FPS that much, and they make it look blurrier. So probably not worth using upscalers unless you're gaming at 4K. And they didn't test the ray tracing. I mean, they do mention here, Dragon's Dogma 2 offers ray tracing as a graphics option, but other than mildly improving the ambient lighting, the hit to the performance isn't worth it. For example, the 4070 Ti sees an average drop around 20% when you turn RT on without any upscaling, which is pretty good. I don't know how that's pretty good. To me, that's pretty bad. You're losing 20% of your FPS because you turn on RT. I mean, now do you see why the general public still doesn't care about ray tracing? Doesn't this game have DLSS frame gen? It does not have it. It does not have it. There's no frame generation in the game as of yet. FSR 3 doesn't look... Well, that's because they heavily optimized the game to utilize the upscaler. I don't think... So I think Capcom just kind of bolted on the upscalers probably within the last 6 months of the game's development. So it was kind of an afterthought because the engine... You know, Capcom's track record of their RE engine games is not really okay. It's not the worst because I've seen much worse in terms of implementing these features, these upscalers, but they're not the best. Like they don't have the best. The best example I can give you would be like Avatar or Infinite Wealth, like the Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. That game shipped day one with all the upscalers, even the Intel upscaler, and all of it worked just perfectly without any issues. This game, they're like, okay, let's put FSR3 and DLSS in the game, but we're just gonna like not do. They basically did the bare minimum, and that's the reason why the upscaler performance doesn't actually scale. So, like for example, quality. So, like DLSS quality performs exactly the same as native. FSR3 quality is like 4 FPS worse. So clearly their implementation of the upscalers is not good. You know what I mean? Like it's like they didn't even, to me it looks like DLSS quality is actually not changing the resolution. It's actually just probably turning on DLAA. And FSR3 is quality is probably doing the same thing. It's like it's turning on the FSR equivalent of anti-aliasing that the DLSS has, because there is something, I forgot what it's called, but it's turning that thing on, but it's leaving the resolution the same. Now, what I don't understand is why the balanced preset is identical to the native. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, okay, yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think of that. You're saying that it's probably so CPU bound that the GPU's headroom, yeah, maybe. At ultra performance, it does go up though. It does go up. It's just you gotta make it turn into a blurry mess and use ultra performance preset in order to actually see the FPS go up in a meaningful way. So that is not good news for anyone who is relying on upscalers, particularly those that are going to use FSR3. I feel like most people that actually use upscalers, they're actually using FSR instead of DLSS because they have an older GPU that doesn't have access to DLSS. Like they have like a 1080 Ti, or they have a 1060, or a 1070 Ti. And those GPUs can't use DLSS at all, even though they're NVIDIA GPUs. So the people using those GPUs have to use FSR3. They have to rely on AMD to make the game playable for them, which is kind of weird in an ironic way. You found Ultra does improve in CPU bound. Okay. Well, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, so I'm really curious to see how this game is going to run on my computer, because I'm going to be testing the game on like 4 different computers. So I'll just give you guys like a preview of what I'm going to test the game on. So I'm going to test the game, and for those that watched yesterday, they already know what I'm going to say. So we're going to test the game first on a Ryzen 9 7950X non-X3D with a RTX 4080 Super at 4K native resolution. So I'm curious to know, how does a 32-thread Zen 4 with no 3D V-cache handle the game when paired with an NVIDIA 4080 Super? Then I will test the game with the X3D. So we're going to go 7950X3D because it has 32 threads, but it has half of the cores with the V-cache, game mode, all that stuff. And then we're going to be pairing this CPU with an RTX 4090. So the 4090 and the 3D V-cache. So this will be my quote-unquote best possible gaming experience, because we got 3D V-cache, Zen 4, the most CPU threads possible, because it seems to me like this game likes CPU threads. The game actually scales with more CPU threads. So I'm going to give it 32 threads and run it in game mode, V-cache, all that stuff, and then pair it up with a 4090 to get rid of any sort of GPU bottleneck and run the game at 4K. So that'll be test number 2. Test number 3 is going to be Threadripper. So it's going to be a lot of threads. So we're gonna eliminate the possibility of there being not enough threads for the game. So like if it wants to put NPCs on individual threads, it can now do that. Like Marcelo was saying earlier, every NPC needs an i7. Okay, well we're gonna give every NPC a thread because we're gonna stick it on a Threadripper that has 48 threads. 48 threads available, and we're going to pair that up with a Radeon RX 7900 XTX. So the XTX plus Threadripper, and then I will also test the game with Intel's A770 with the Threadripper to see how, like, what's the best we can possibly do with the Intel GPU. And then the final test, as kind of a bonus test, will be the Intel i9 13900K plus the Radeon the Radeon RX 7900 XTX. So we got XTX with Threadripper, XTX with Intel i9, and then we have like GeForce 4090 with X3D, and then we got GeForce 4080 with the standard Ryzen CPU. So those are the tests that I plan on doing, kind of like this. So but I'm only testing like modern CPUs. I'm not going to be bothering with any older CPUs because clearly you don't want to play this game on a CPU that's more than 3 years old, as the results clearly show. So, but I want to see, like, does Vcache actually help? Does thread count actually matter? So we'll be able to put that to the test. So that's pretty much how this is going to go. But yeah, this game went from not being on my radar at all to now being like one of the most intriguing games that I will probably play all year. The other one would be Horizon Forbidden West, which is actually out now as well. So this game I do also want to test to see if these claims that they have for the processor actually matter. But I'm going to be testing with much newer processors than what is actually listed. So they're claiming that for 4K, very high, to maintain above 60 FPS, you need either a RTX 4080 or an RX 7900 XT. With the 70, will you be doing? No, I'm just going to run it stock like I always do. All I do, so, okay, with that CPU, it's very easy to test both scenarios. So it's smart enough to know, like Windows 11 is smart enough to know that if you turn on game mode, it's going to prioritize the 3D Vcache cores for the game. And if you don't, like if I want to just test like 32 threads, fastest cores first, or prioritize the fastest cores, literally all I do is I go into Windows and I turn off game mode. You literally turn off game mode and it does that. So meaning, if I turn off game mode, the CPU, the X3D, will behave like a standard 7950X. So you don't need to do anything with Process Lasso. I've never used Process Lasso. Will you test it with the 7800 XT? That's a good question because I do actually have that CPU. I wasn't planning on doing it, but I might. I could easily test it. I mean, I'd have to install the game on another machine, but yeah. I could test it with that. So if I test it with a 7800 XT, that means that so that CPU is currently paired up with a Radeon RX 7900 XT, not an XTX, a regular XT. So it's the second fastest AMD GPU. So I could test it with that, just as is, and see how it does. So the only difference, though, is that one is running much slower RAM. That CPU that I have is paired up with 5200 megahertz DDR5, and the GPU is a 7900. Oh, you mean the GPU? Oh, I'm sorry, I misread that completely. For some reason, I read that as 7800 X3D. So 7800 X3D I can test. 7800 XT I cannot test. Unfortunately, I do not have that GPU, so I cannot test with that GPU. But I can test 7900 XT with a 7800 X3D. So I'm thinking the 7950 X3D will do better than the 7800 X3D in this particular game. Because Dragon's Dogma really likes CPU threads. Do I have a GRE? No, I do not. So I've got XTX, I've got 4090, 4080 Super, I've got 7900 XT, and then those are like the new GPUs. Everything else that I have are older GPUs. Well, I mean, I have Intel A770, and then I have a bunch of older GPUs. Like I've got the 6950 XT, the what's the older one? The 6900 XT, and then older stuff like Vega 64, Radeon 7, GTX 1080, RTX 3080 Ti, RTX 3090 Ti. So those are the other GPUs that I have that I could technically test, but I don't really plan on doing it. I only really plan on testing with the ones that I already have readily available. Because I feel like if I do a bunch of GPU tests again, last time I did that, I did it for Starfield, and I didn't really get a lot of views on those videos. I feel like the people tend to watch my videos that are more like educational stuff, like how to overclock RAM, like how to run like a lot of RAM. Those sort of videos. I think people value that content more than me just showing like, okay, here's how a bunch of GPUs did in the game, because there's already so many other YouTube channels that are gonna do that content anyway. So I don't know. To me, it seems like it's a bunch of work for not a lot of views, so it's not really worth the time and effort. So I am going to do videos about it, but I'm not gonna do like some old GPU, some old CPU. Like I'm just gonna try to hit all the typical modern processors, because I think like as long as you can see what that is, that gives you an idea. Because we will retroactively go back and test again later this year, because this year we're getting new hardware. So keep in mind, we're getting Zen 5 and like 5090 and those things, and maybe RDNA 4 and Intel's Battle Mage. So there are going to be newer GPUs, meaning the tests that I'm doing now, they seem like, oh, they're the new hardware. Well, they're not really new hardware, it's just current generation hardware. So we're going to show current generation hardware, which will soon become last gen hardware later this year. So that's why I don't really want to test the really old stuff, because I don't think there's a lot of interest in it, to be honest. I feel like most people, like, for instance, the question about will you test with a 7800 XT? I mean, I wish I had that GPU, because I would test it with the GPU, but I don't have the GPU. So, but the results are already here for that GPU. So you can already kind of see like how it does at 4K 55 with a modern CPU. But technically, its proper resolution is this one, so this would be the correct result. So 73. All right. I don't have much more to talk about. What else did I want to talk about? We talked about GTC. We talked about Dragon's Dogma. Oh, Horizon Forbidden West. Horizon Forbidden West. I think this game is one of the better PC ports. So I will probably live stream gameplay of this maybe one time. I don't know. Like, do you think there's a lot of interest in this game? I feel like there isn't. This game is already 2 years old. It's been out on PS5 for more than 2 years at this point. It came out in February of 2022. You know, the Burning Shores DLC has been out for like a year or something. So it's out on PC. It's kind of like when Ratchet and Clank came out on PC, and Miles Morales and those games, like the Sony first person games, came out. So, oh yeah, Ghost of Tsushima is coming out in May. Yeah, on PC. I feel like there's not a lot of interest in it because it's being overshadowed. I don't know what it is about Horizon. Horizon is like there's like a running meme about this game series, right? Like every time Horizon launches, it always gets overshadowed by something else. So when the first game came out, Horizon Zero Dawn, it came out in 2017. And then you know what else came out around the exact same time that the first Horizon game came out? Do people remember? I'll give you a hint. It was a Nintendo Switch game that got Game of the Year in 2017. So Horizon Zero Dawn comes out and then immediately gets covered up by The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. So Breath of the Wild comes out and it's like it's like people forgot completely about Horizon Zero Dawn on console because Breath of the Wild came out like in the same time. I think they were within like 2 weeks of each other or something. So it got overshadowed by that game. Fast forward to 2022. Horizon Forbidden West comes out in February. It's like the beginning of February 2022, if I remember correctly. Someone can fact check me on when Forbidden West first launched. I'm pretty sure it was like the beginning of February 2022. And then you know what else came out later that month in the same year? Elden Ring. Elden Ring comes out and completely like steps on top and crushes Horizon Forbidden West into obscurity. Because Elden Ring was like Game of the Year instantly. It was like the year had barely started. We were literally in February, and then immediately Game of the Year already arrives. Like in the first quarter of the year, here's Game of the Year. There's like no competition. It's guaranteed to win, and it straight up wins. Oh wow. Okay, so it was actually later in February. Okay, that's even worse. That's even worse because that means it's like within 1 or 2 weeks of the launch of Elden Ring. Elden Ring was like at the very end of February, if I remember. Unless that's Elden Ring's day. But anyway, like the point is, every time Horizon launches, another game comes out and like completely destroys the launch. It's like, what is Horizon Forbidden West? I don't even know what that is. It's like, oh, Elden Ring. Oh, okay. All I know is Elden Ring. You know, so it's like now, fast forward 2 years later, Horizon Forbidden West comes out on PC, and you know what? You know what also comes out on the same exact day? Dragon's Dogma 2. Dragon's Dogma 2 comes out, so nobody even cares about Forbidden West at this point. Even if somebody was looking forward to playing this game on PC, most likely they also want to play Dragon's Dogma 2. So it's like, too bad. I mean, yeah, so I will cover this game. I do want to play this game at least. I want to show some of the gameplay on stream like one time, I guess. So I'll probably stream this using the 4090 and the X3D just to kind of show 4K, everything maxed out. This is what it looks like. You know, I'll probably do that. So just one time, I don't know. But if I get so into Dragon's Dogma 2, I don't think I'm going to be able to play Horizon Forbidden West for a while. So, because for me, I feel like this year has less overall games that are spread across the entire year. But what's coming out, it's like all kind of grouped together in the first 3 months of the year. Yeah, every time Horizon launches, it's like something dumb, like some other thing like launches at the same time. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, you know who also has this problem? Team Ninja, Koei Tecmo has the same problem. Like, they try to launch games that then also get foreshadowed, or not foreshadowed, they get they get overshadowed by other games. Like back in 2022, for example, like Elden Ring comes out, and a few weeks later, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks later, uh, Final Fantasy Origins, Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origins launches and that's by Team Ninja, and that's like their Elden Ring killer, and that didn't kill anything. Like there's like, oh, we're gonna kill Chaos. Well, so that game was basically the meme, like, kill Chaos. Jack is gonna kill Chaos. Like that. You guys remember that game? You guys remember that game? So that game came out in, I think, like the middle of March 2022. That game also was overshadowed by Elden Ring. So that shows that a game, even if a game launches before a really hyped up game, like for example, Horizon launched before Elden Ring, then Elden Ring came out and completely gobbled it up. A game can also launch after a hyped up game and still get gobbled up. So it's like Horizon launches, Elden Ring launches and absorbs it. Then like Stranger of Paradise launches and then Elden Ring still absorbs it, even though it came out like after it. That's hilarious. So although I did manage to beat that game, I did actually enjoy Stranger of Paradise. Although I did not like the game on the higher difficulty levels. I feel like that game, I think they overtuned a lot of the boss fights, and they didn't give you enough tools early game to be able to deal with the higher difficulty content. So that was my big problem with Stranger of Paradise. Otherwise, I really did enjoy that game. Yeah. Seems like Team Ninja tends to run into that problem because the same thing is happening to them now, right? Like today is the launch of Rise of the Ronin. Rise of the Ronin is another game that I want to play, but it comes out the exact same day as Dragon's Dogma. So it's like, why is it that like my favorite developers all decide to launch their games literally on the exact same day? Because I like Sony's first party games, even though I have a terrible track record of never completing their games. They launch Horizon. I like Team Ninja's games because I like hardcore action games like Neo, Ninja Gaiden, that type of game, like Wolong, Final Fantasy Origins, all those games. Like Team Ninja's put out these banger games like literally every single year. They've been cranking out all these awesome games. Neo 2 was 2020. Neo 2 on PC was 2021. Stranger of Paradise was 2022. Wolong Fallen Dynasty was 2023. Rise of the Ronin is 2024. Man, these guys are literally on fire, launching game after game after game every single year, every single quarter, every single March. Man. Did you cover PS5 Pro? Oh, yeah, I did. I did cover it last week, but we can talk about it again. Yeah, I did talk about PS5 Pro. And the thing is, guys, I feel like everything that I said about where to expect the performance was right on the money. Because remember what I told you guys. Remember what I said about PS5 Pro. Remember what I told you guys. I told you guys that PS5 Pro, and there's at least 2 or 3 streams of me saying this. So it's like I can make clips of me saying this. But anyway, AMD Radeon RX 7700 XT. I said probably like 2 or 3 different times, different streams in the past, that the PS5 Pro is basically going to be about the same in terms of rasterization as a 7700 XT. And now that we have all the leaks, I feel like I'm not going to claim any credit because I just randomly said that, but I was right. Because here's the thing. If you look, RX 6700, this is the PS5 in terms of rasterization. So we do know from the leaks. Now, remember what I said. I said 7700 XT is the performance. Look at that. 7700 XT, 42% faster. So that is RDNA 3 based GPU rasterization. See, so they're saying in the leak that the rasterization is, they say 45%, right here. The GPU is an RDNA 3 IP with up to 45% faster graphics rendering. See? And 40, okay, this is tech power up. This is not the be all end all, but 42% faster than the 6700 is in the ballpark. It's in the ballpark. It's RDNA 3. So basically, that's what it is in terms of the effective performance. So if anybody wants to estimate how a PS5 Pro is going to perform, all you have to do is look up benchmarks of this GPU, and that will give you an idea of how powerful the PS5 Pro is. And this is not really new, because it was easy for me to guess this. I'll tell you guys why I was able to guess this and get it right. And it's because I basically did the same thing with the PS4. So the PlayStation 4 was the... Let's go back to the GPU database. The PS4 was a 7850 Pitcairn. This was the PS4, the base PS4. Now we gotta find the PS4 Pro, which is this. So notice how it's always kind of like this type of chip. So it's like Pro. Pro is basically XL. So if you go back here, Pitcairn Pro. Pitcairn Pro, this would be the equivalent of like a 6700 today. Whereas this, you could think of this as like a 7700 XT because it's the cut down die. The 480 was the fully enabled die. So this one's the cut down one. They always go with like a cut down one because they get better yields. It's typically lower cost, so it's cheaper for Sony. So that's the reason why it is what it is. It's going to be the first Pro model worth getting, considering the AI accelerator. Yeah, that's the other thing, too. It's got some differentiating things in there. So it does have the spectral super... Is that what they call it? PlayStation spectral resolution? I remember it was like PSSR. I don't even know if this article mentions it. But anyway, the PSSR thing is in there, and that's basically the PlayStation upscaler. So yeah, that's cool. The other thing too is the ray tracing performance is, they say, can be up to 4 times higher than the regular PS5. Which means that the ray tracing stuff in this GPU is better than the 7700 XT. PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, yeah, that's what it is. So, yeah, that alone is kind of the reason why I really, really want one of these. I really want a PS5 Pro because playing Final Fantasy VII at 30 frames per second in order to actually enjoy the game at 4K native resolution is not the most enjoyable way to play that game. But I've gotten used to it. My eyes have adjusted to 30 FPS again. So it's almost like playing Bloodborne on the PS4 all over again. Except the frame times in Final Fantasy VII are actually a lot better than they were in Bloodborne. So, yeah. I really, really wish the PS5 Pro came out last fall or like right now, because that is exactly what is needed to run Final Fantasy VII at a higher FPS. Because literally all they gotta do is turn on PSSR quality preset and you're good to go. Because this GPU is a 1440p GPU. Like, it can game at 1440p. So PSSR quality is basically at 4K resolution. PSSR quality means 1440p upscaled to 4K, and that will look good. That looks fine. Spectral, it wonders against ghosting. It's just marketing. I guess it's just marketing. Yeah, I don't know. That's marketing. Well, because temporal I think has already been taken. Spatial has already been taken. They could have called it PlayStation. Well, yeah, no, it's spectral. There is a technical reason why they'll choose that name over some other arbitrary marketing term. But we'll have to wait until Mark Cerny decides to explain that, or whoever's going to talk about it from Sony. But yeah, I definitely want one of those. I want one of those more than like a 5090 or an RDNA 4 GPU, to be honest, because so many of the games that I want to play this year, or I already have been playing this year, are PlayStation 5 timed exclusives. Like, for example, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I can only play it on PS5. So it's like, I'm not going to wait around until the PC version of the game. No, I'm going to play it now when it's most relevant. And likewise, Rise of the Ronin is a PlayStation 5 exclusive that literally launched today. So, and I'm not going to wait around to play that on PC. I'm going to play it now. I'm not going to wait a whole another year just to play it on PC. So, but the PS5 Pro would have made the gaming experience on all those games significantly better. The third game that is a PS5 exclusive that I'm going to be playing this year is coming out next month, and that game is called Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade is also a PlayStation 5 exclusive. So basically, 3 out of all the games that I plan on covering this year are PS5 exclusives, as far as I'm concerned. And that's why I really wish the PS5 Pro was available now. The only other games I'm going to be playing are Dragon's Dogma 2 on PC, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, which we've already covered, although I still need to finish it. That was on PC. Grand Blue Fantasy Relink is on PC. I already beat that game, although there is a lot of endgame content that I still need to do. And then other than those, I mean, there's just Tekken 8, which is a fighting game, so I can play that whenever I feel like it. And then that's it. There are no other big games. The only other game... Oh, Ghost of Tsushima. That's right. Ghost of Tsushima on PC. I mean, okay, that falls in the same bucket as Horizon Forbidden West. You know, like, whenever I feel like playing that, or if I am going to cover that on PC later. Because I already have that game on PS5. So, not really super hyped about that, to be honest, because I've already played some of it. I have not beat that game, though. So, yeah, whatever. And then the only other game that I'm looking forward to is Elden Ring DLC. Elden Ring DLC, Shadow of the Erdtree. That's coming out in June. So that puts us at the half, which means the second half of the year is basically going to be Trails Through Darkness or something, The Legend of Heroes. I'll be playing that on PC later this year. And the only other game is Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail, but that's an MMO, and that's just an expansion. So, that's it. Those are all the games that I plan on covering this year. So, I don't know. There's basically nothing for the second half besides The Legend of Heroes, unless there's like an Ease game or something. But other than that, there's like The Legend of Heroes and Dawn Trail. That's it. There's like nothing else. So I'll have plenty of time to finish those games that I haven't finished, like a Dragon. That's it. Semi-interested in Avowed. I don't even know what that is. Avowed? That's the first I've heard of that. I don't even know what that is. Avowed. Now I have to look it up. Avowed. Oh, we can just look it up here. Avowed. Avowed is an upcoming action role-playing video game developed by Obsidian, published by X. Oh, this is a Microsoft thing? Same universe. Oh, Pillars of Eternity? I never played Pillars of Eternity. I've heard of it, though. So, yeah, okay. But it says scheduled to be released in Q3, Q4. When they have a time frame that and they have 2 quarters put together like that, always assume the later one. Otherwise, it means it's going to be next year. So, yeah. When you're going to play the Suicide Squad game? Probably never. Probably never. I don't know. Like, did that game come out this year? You know, one game that I wanted to play but never got around to it was Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2. This game looked really fun. I know a bunch of people that played this game. It looks really fun. But the problem is, it came out... See, this game ran into the same problem as Horizon, as far as I'm concerned. Because this game came out literally in between... didn't it come out between Final Fantasy VII and all those other games? I think it was like... Yeah, February... Yeah. So this game came out like right after I bought like a bunch of games in January. So that's why I didn't get this. I didn't get it because I bought Tekken 8, Granblue Fantasy Relink, and Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. Oh, and Persona 3 Reload. So I literally bought like 4 games all in the course of like 1 week. And then this game came out like a week after Persona, and I was like, that game looks very good, but too bad. It's like I don't have any time to play it anyway, so yeah. This one kind of missed the boat, unfortunately, at least for me. But yeah, this one looks good. It looked good. I've seen people play it. It looked really fun, actually. This game actually appealed to me a little bit better than Palworld. But Palworld is early access, so it's like, I'm going to wait and see how Palworld matures a bit before I revisit that game. Yeah, Helldivers 2 does look like a lot of fun. It's just, I'm too heavily invested right now in single-player RPGs. Mostly Final Fantasy, Dragon's Dogma, well, soon to be Dragon's Dogma, and previously Granblue and Like a Dragon, that I just don't have time for this game. Yeah, I don't have any, like, I basically blew out the gaming budget on all these games, and that's the reason why you guys don't see any, like, hardware stuff. But the nice thing about all these games coming out now is, like, there's literally there's no hardware, there's no new hardware to cover right now. You know what I mean? So it's like everything is basically gaming centric. It's all like software. There's like everything in the industry is like all this like AI stuff. So there's no new GPUs, there's no CPUs, there's nothing. There's no like interesting tech news right now. It's all like game stuff. You know, for all we know, Game of the Year launched today. Possibly Dragon's Dogma might be Game of the Year. Who knows? If Dragon's Dogma 2 doesn't get Game of the Year, then the only other game that I can see getting Game of the Year is Final Fantasy VII. Because Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is really good. It's basically Square Enix like putting together all of the things that they learned from Final Fantasy X onward. So, like, what do I mean by that? So, Final Fantasy X's level-based structure Final Fantasy 12's AI, Final Fantasy 13's, well, that's kind of the, like, I guess Final Fantasy 13's open area questing, sort of. And then Final Fantasy 15's large open world zones. I mean, it's kind of like that. So it's like all the things that they learned from their previous games, they kind of put that all together in this game. Final Fantasy 16 doesn't count because I feel like that was in development around the same time as this game. So, speaking of Hellblade 2 on your radar, no, not really. No, it's not. I never played the first one, so I'm not really tracking that. What was the game that I was actually tracking? There was something that I was tracking for May. Or what? Or am I thinking of nothing? Yeah, I got literally nothing in May. So here's what I've got. I'm just gonna read off the list. I'm just gonna read off the list. January. Pal World, Tekken 8, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. Technically, The Last of Us Part 2 was also in January, but I didn't get that game. February, Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, Persona 3 Reload, Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth. And I guess Helldivers 2 falls in there, but I wasn't tracking Helldivers 2. So that's the reason why I don't have that game. March, Horizon Forbidden West, Dragon's Dogma 2, and Rise of the Ronin. And all three of those games come out on the exact same day, which is hilarious. April, Stellar Blade. That's basically it. May, nothing. June, Shadow of the Erd Tree. July, Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail and The Legend of Heroes Trails Through Daybreak. I'm assuming that those games are going to come out in July. So I have July down as the placeholder for those two games. I don't know if those games are actually coming out in July. Like, for all we know, one of them could be in August, one of them could be in late June, who knows. But that's what I have written down. And then August, I think Black Myth Wukong is coming out in August. I don't know how I feel about that game. That game looks like it's going to play a lot like a Team Ninja game, but the studio doesn't have the reputation. So I don't know. I have it listed though, but that's because I literally have like nothing. Because there's like nothing in August, nothing in September, nothing in October, nothing in November, nothing in December. So that's basically it. That's what I mean. Like, all the games that I want to play are coming out in the first half of the year. Everything, the second half is basically nothing. Which means the second half of the year is all going to be about hardware. It's all going to be like new CPUs, like Zen 5. And we're going to do a lot of videos about motherboards. We're going to talk a lot about motherboards, a lot of X870E, B850E or whatever. Like all those type of videos that I did like a year and a half ago at this point. Those are the type of videos I'm going to be putting out. I'm just going to crank out a bunch of motherboard videos in the summer after Computex. You haven't been properly excited for a single-player game this year? Really? Not even Final Fantasy or Dragon's Dogma? Because those two games are, like, really good games. Those are really good single-player games. Isn't Xbox supposed to drop a newish console? I don't think that's this year. PS5 Pro is Q4. I expect PS5 Pro to be out in November of this year. Which is unfortunate, because like all the games that I want to play on PlayStation are coming out now. Now. Not in November, now. So it's like, I really wish that console was out now. Oh, AMD put a new GPU driver out that added support for Dragon's Dogma and Horizon and some game that I don't know anything about. Phil Spencer said there's no plans on doing a better Xbox right now. Yeah, I think there's gonna be the new one that doesn't have the drive. There's gonna be like a digital one. It's gonna be like the Series S, only it's like the Series X without the Blu-ray drive. Yeah, this is the thing that I really wish was coming out soon. Does this article talk about the whole, like, I guess, yeah, they're all parroting the same stuff. Yeah. Dragon's Dogma. There's a lot of Dragon's Dogma videos right now. Hmm. Yeah, that's pretty much it. This like this week is kind of there's not a lot. There's not a lot to talk about. I don't know. I don't know if it's something different or not, or if it's a revision for the one that doesn't have the drive. The MSI Claw. Isn't that their Steam Deck thing? MSI Claw. MSI Claw gets benchmarked. Initial testing shows ROG Ally with Ryzen Z1 ahead of Intel Meteor Lake for handhelds. Well, okay, see, like, I'm not surprised. Well, this is an old article, though. This is February 17th. Isn't there a newer one? That's the most recent article. I'm not surprised because the problem, see, here's the problem. With a handheld, the most important thing, besides like the screen quality and the ability to play the game, is actually the battery life. And I might go so far as to say the noise level. Like, how noisy are the fans? Because I don't want it to be noisy, and I don't want it to have, like, terrible battery life. So, the problem with Intel right now is efficiency is a big problem for them, which is really strange to think about that because I remember when it was the reverse, where AMD was not the efficient one in handhelds or in mobile. Like back when Zen first came out, the first Ryzen laptops, they did not have good battery life compared to Intel. Their battery life was okay, but Intel's battery life at the time in laptops was a lot better. Fast forward to around the time of Zen 2, Zen 2 was what flipped the script. And that's when everything changed. It all changed with Zen 2.5. There was an APU from AMD called Renoir, which was think of it as the Ryzen 4000 series. So the Ryzen 7 4800H was the best gaming laptop CPU because the laptop was quiet, the laptop had really good battery life, and the IPC in that monolithic die for a mobile chip was actually slightly better than the desktop variant. And that's because it was a Zen 2.5 versus like Zen 2. So, and that was the time when AMD's DDR4 compatibility got really, really good. So that is when things changed. And now, if you're looking to buy a laptop, you're probably going to want an AMD CPU in the laptop because, yeah, the laptop is much quieter and the battery life is significantly longer. So things just kind of like have gone in that direction for the last couple of years. Basically, since the pandemic, AMD has dominated in terms of energy efficiency in mobile. And that's the reason why I'm not surprised by the MSI Claw losing to the ROG Ally. Intel delays are totally within expectation. I mean, speaking of Intel, they're delaying their Ohio fab by another year. I don't even know what's going on. And somebody said at the beginning of the stream that they got all this money from the government and whatever. Like, I feel like we talked about that last week. That was on the last episode of This Week in Tech, and I kind of complained. I felt like that was kind of unfair, that there was a ruling in favor of Intel. Intel can apparently continue selling to Chinese tech companies like Huawei, but AMD and Nvidia are supposedly banned. How does that work? See, so I don't know. It's like, first of all, Intel managed to get like all this US government money just kind of donated to them. So that they got all this taxpayer money, but yet the other companies like AMD don't get any of that. And then, oh, by the way, Intel's allowed to continue selling to Chinese companies, but AMD can't. It's like, how is that fair? So I don't know what's going on there. Apparently, Intel's got like really good lawyers or something, because I don't know how they're able to pull that off. I really don't know how to pull that off. Because think about it, like, guys, let me show you something. Look at this. This company begged the US government for like, I don't know, to the tune of like $1 billion or something. They got like all this money recently so they could build these fabs, supposedly. I mean, that's how it goes. And then they're like, oh, we need to sell the Chinese companies. Oh, what about national security? Oh, no, don't worry about that. We're Intel. We are an honest company. We're not going to do anything bad. So it's like, okay, you can sell to them. And then AMD's like, what about us? Can we sell to them? We make x86 CPUs also. It's like, no, that would be a national security infringement. Like, what? How? So, like, I don't understand that. So, but whatever, you know, like, it is what it is. So it's like, this is their stock. Despite all that cash infusion, whatever, you know, like, I guess they give all the money to the lawyers at the end of the day because it's like, nothing really seems to change. You know what I'm saying? Like, nothing really seems to change. So, all joking aside, the problem is I feel like this is giving them an unfair advantage. So unless they're able to really take advantage of this, they're really showing incompetency if nothing really changes. Like, if they're given a head start on the racetrack, like if they're able to like move up like 50 meters in front of their competitors and then start running, and then like, you know, like they're like way ahead, right? But then like the competitor still overtakes them somehow. Like, that just makes it look that much more embarrassing. So I don't know. They're gonna get caught with their pants down again when the Arizona TSMC goes online. Well, the other thing too is they're trying to get TSMC to make their chips. Remember, like TSMC makes their the A770. Look, Intel A770. Check this out. Foundry, TSMC, right there. They don't even make their own graphics cards, guys. Like, they make, TSMC makes their graphics cards for them. So, and the funny thing is, though, here's the ironic thing. TSMC makes their graphics cards because they don't trust themselves to make their graphics cards competitive. And yet, the graphics card still ends up underperforming severely compared to the competition. So, it's like, okay, I don't know. 256-bit bus, and it's a 1080p graphics card. You know what I mean? Now, I can't wait to see what Battlemage does. Like, I really, really want to see. Probably the most interesting GPU launch of this entire year is probably going to be the Intel Battlemage. Like, no joke. The upcoming Intel GPU is going to be far more interesting than the 5090 and AMD's RDNA 4. Because they are so far behind. I have no idea what they're going to do, but like I have already said on stream, I've gone on the record and I've already given you guys my estimate for where I expect Battlemage to perform. A lot of people think that it needs to be better than what I've said, and a lot of people think that based off of what I said, if it performs like what I think it will perform as, it's dead on arrival. But But I think that's kind of being a little unfair to Intel. I think that's having an unfair expectation. Pat is aiming to sell off Intel Foundry to AMD with akin to AMD. Wait, really? They're gonna sell the Intel Foundry business the way AMD did? Why would they do that though? No, Intel can't do that. Intel can't do that, guys. Intel can't do that because, hey, the reason why they can't do that is because there's too much red tape with the foundry. Think about it like this. If Intel got money from the US government to build fabs in the US with the whole idea of protecting national security and employing local American workers and all this other stuff, whatever it may be, I am pretty sure that there are some clauses in the legal documents saying that they have to maintain management and control of that facility. They can't just like sell that off to a third party. There's probably some exception in there saying you can sell it off, but it has to be to an American-owned company. Like you can't go and sell your foundry to some foreign entity. You know, like they can't go sell it to TSMC, for example, if they want to get out of the foundry business. So I don't know what they're going to do. Like, that's weird. No, it has nothing to do with NVIDIA. Like, no. Wait, what? They're thinking of selling the foundry to NVIDIA? I don't know if NVIDIA wants that, though. I don't think NVIDIA wants to do that. No. See, the thing is, guys, NVIDIA is not a foundry company. No, I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe there is some interest in getting into the foundry business, but I'm pretty sure that NVIDIA has already looked at how expensive it is to maintain the foundry and keep updating the node and innovating. And they've looked at how hard it has been for the current foundry players to maintain and innovate. So I don't think they want a part of that. See, NVIDIA's vision is to be a technology platform enabler. They don't want to be a manufacturer of like fixed things. Like they don't want to be like an assembly line for stuff. That's not their vision. So they only want to create tools and things that their customers can use to then create and build up that ecosystem. That is their strategy. So I don't think it has anything to do with the foundry. The foundry business is really, really tough. And I think NVIDIA knows how hard it is, and they don't really want a part of that. They would rather invest their money into other things. I don't think GlobalFoundries wants Intel's foundry, though. See, the only thing I can think of is the foundry would have to go to an existing foundry. Like, someone else would want to buy the foundry just so they don't have to build another foundry. But there's probably some, like, clause in the agreement with the US government saying that they can't sell it to certain foreign entities. So, that might disqualify some companies. But I don't know. I could be wrong. I don't understand how Intel can be given all this money, this taxpayer money, literally just squander it and then try to sell off the foundry. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I don't know how they're allowed to do that. If they are, then either the government clearly has a huge oversight on that, and it's going to make the U.S. government look really, really dumb in the public's eyes. And in the business world eyes, if Intel's able to do something dumb like that. Like if Intel's like, oh, give me all this money so I can build this next generation fab. Okay, thanks for the money. I'm going to build a fab. Now I'm going to sell it off. And it's like, what? Like, I don't think that was part of the deal. So, but I don't know. I haven't really been paying attention to it. So that's my 2 cents on how I think that is going to be. They've got a lot of challenges, clearly, but I feel like they can't just exit the foundry business for other reasons, and some of those reasons we probably aren't even fully aware of. Maybe they'd be allowed to sell it off if it retains Intel in name only. See, I don't know how that works. No, 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 because if they try to sell it off to like Abu Dhabi Group or like Tencent and the Chinese investment firms, that's not gonna fly, man. Like that's not gonna fly. They're gonna get sued by the U.S. government, and I don't know how that's gonna work. Someone else takes control of the business side, but it stays in Intel's name. No, governments will easily see through that. That's not gonna work. That's not gonna work. That's like AMD bought when AMD bought ATI, and ATI continued to keep their brand for a while, but then eventually it didn't work, and then the name just kind of went away. Yeah, I don't see them giving up the foundry business because to me it's kind of dumb. Like they have so much IP, so many patents in the foundry world. Like to me it's dumb. Like they would just kind of need to they just need to they need to figure out what the issues are. They need to work that out. But the thing is, if it takes them another 5 years, they're going to burn through a lot of cash. If they don't have competitive designs, and they're not energy efficient, they're going to continue to start losing market share in the data center space. See, like the guys who pay attention only to the desktop, so like this and this, these things, in the grand scheme of things, these things, consumer specific products, they don't, like, especially desktop performance parts, they don't actually matter. What matters is how energy efficient and performant the processors are in the data center. And then also in mobile. Mobile and data center are way more important than like some high-end overclockable SKU that enthusiasts buy. You know what I mean? Like, no one cares about this stuff. Like, pretty much, if Intel can't be competitive, if they keep losing their competition, they lose to AMD in data center, they lose to AMD in mobile over a longer period of time, the public will start picking up on that. And then it'll become a snowball effect at some point, and the tables will fully turn if that happens. But right now, Intel has all this money from the government. They basically got all this free money from the government for some weird reason. I don't know how they were able to convince them. Like I said, Pat's got some really smart lawyers. Intel's paying all their money to their lawyers, so it's like their stock goes down because they got to pay those lawyers a lot of money. It's expensive, like times are tough, like the lawyers need to eat too, so they give all the money to the lawyers. The lawyers convince the U.S. government to give them like billions of dollars to keep them afloat. So, whatever. So the whole sense of Intel's too big to fail. Well, they're too big to fail because they're able to keep siphoning taxpayer dollars for some weird reason, even though the other companies aren't able to do that. So I don't know who decided that was fair. Like I said, it's like a lawyer thing. But as long as they're able to keep doing that, as they can keep on like resurrecting themselves with taxpayer money from the U.S. government, I think they'll be okay. And then like these weird deals where like they're able to sell to Chinese, like Intel can sell their CPUs to Huawei, but AMD can't. Like literally the U.S. government doesn't allow AMD to sell x86 CPUs to Chinese tech companies. Yet it turns a blind eye because it's like Intel's allowed to do it. So it's like I said, really good lawyers can make or break the difference there. It can totally make or break the deal. Like for real. Like we're seeing this happen like in real time. Intel Foundry is a separate entity, so it wouldn't be Intel selling it off. It's still one group though. It's still one group. Like It's still one big company. The foundry business is just a different business unit. I don't think Marzell's Dead has a good track record for Intel. Pretty sure it's pushing the idea that Battle Mage wouldn't be a thing at all. I don't know. Okay, the whole thing about MLID and whatever was being said about that, I didn't watch any of those videos, so I don't know what was actually said. I'm telling you guys based off of my own understanding of the dynamics between these companies, their interactions with the US government, because all this stuff about the foundry, it has to do with the US government. And it's all under the guise of protecting national security or some BS that the lawyers were able to convince the US government on. You know, like that's basically the gist of it. So I don't know what was said in the MLID video. So I don't know if that has anything to do with what I was talking about. But I mean, what I know is what's actually going on. I don't know what was said in that video. If that's all speculation, then yeah, he could be right or wrong. I have no idea. I didn't watch the video, so I don't know what was said. It just seems an interesting take. Regardless, Intel needs to step things up. Yeah, well, yeah. But the thing is, if things stay as they are and people remain ignorant to how things are in the actual technology, I think Intel will be fine. Speculation and leaks. Oh, what was the actual leak? Was the leak that Intel was trying to sell off their fab to Nvidia? Man, that sounds like somebody somewhere literally just like said that off the cuff. And it turned into a leak. You know what I mean? Like, nah, that's whatever. That's not even worth time really talking about because they're just... These companies right now are being pulled in so many different directions that I feel like they're all just kind of tripping on top of each other. Was Battle Mage was like 2 years ago being canceled? Oh, that? Yeah, no, that was way... Yeah, that's not right at all. Yeah. I mean, I told you guys that... So, okay, my take on that, because I remember when that was being said. My response to that was... Look at the GPU market potential, look at the upside, and look at the TAM. The TAM is too big, the demand is too high, the market is there. All those factors are the reason why Intel is not ever going to cancel their graphics card division. So whoever was saying that Intel was going to cancel their GPU division clearly doesn't understand the market, and they don't understand the big picture of the GPU industry and how it's not just about how an A770 flopped at launch. So it's not going to go away. I mean, I said this at the A770 launch. Because people were... Cause I remember this. People came into my stream and they were like, okay, is it true Intel's going to cancel their GPUs? And that was the first I heard of that. And I was like, why? First I thought, like, why would they do that? You know, like, because I immediately thought of, like, how big the GPU market is. So why would you do that when you can only go up? If you're starting from zero, you can't go less than zero. You can't become negative market share. You can only gain at that point. So there was no reason at the time. And now we understand, you know, all this other stuff with AI. So yeah, no, of course not. AMD fired Raja, and then Intel fired Raja. Yeah, man. Everywhere that guy goes, it just seems like bad news. I'm not saying that he's bad or that he's incompetent. I think Raja is a very smart person. I mean, he has done a lot of good in his career. If you look at all that he did when he was at Apple, if you look at what he did when he was at AMD, now granted, AMD ultimately fired him indirectly, but if you look at what he did, so before Raja was at AMD, AMD was doing the whole, like, very large, what was it, VF5, very long word instruction or something, VFWI or whatever, like the HD 6000, HD 5000, those GPUs, those are before Raja. But then they were already doing like GCN. So Raja joined when GCN 1, I think, was already out. Or maybe GCN 2 was on its way out, like going to launch. Then Raja joined. When Raja joined, so a lot of people think Raja is not good because AMD fired him and then Intel fired him and Intel's GPU was terrible at launch. So they all blame Raja, but Raja is not bad. Like Raja did the same thing for AMD that Rory Reid did for AMD on the CPU side. So what do I mean by that? Rory Reid was the CEO of AMD before Lisa Su. So he was the one. So a lot of people don't know this, but he was the one who actually put AMD on this track to success before he left. He was the one who convinced Jim Keller to come back to AMD and help them build a competitive CPU architecture again, which was ultimately Ryzen. So he's the one who did that, not Lisa Su. A lot of people seem to forget that. Lisa Su tends to take a lot of the credit. Now, I'm not trying to discredit Lisa Su. Lisa Su has been an excellent CEO, and there's a reason why AMD is the way they are today. She has definitely carried the torch well and basically executed on that plan. And then after that plan was completed, she has helped push them forward even further with all the stuff that they have now. So, but Rory Reid was the one who put them on the trajectory to get to that path, which is ultimately where they are now. So he set the vision. He basically set the course for them to sail through all these terrible storms and stuff to get through bulldozer, get through pile driver, excavator, steamroller, get through all the tough times, and then get out on the other side of the tunnel, and then you're going to be golden. So he did all that. He got Jim Keller to come back. Jim Keller helped them design Zen. Lisa Su took over after he left. It's one of those things where Rory Reid probably knew at the time that he would not be there long enough to see the success, to basically see the fruits of his labor. And ultimately that's what happened. He left the company. Lisa Su took over. She was already there, by the way, like while he was the CEO. She was the vice president of one of the divisions, I guess. I forgot which one. But she was a VP. And then she basically took the CEO role after he left. And then continued to steer the ship in the same direction that he'd already set. And AMD is where they are now because those two did a really good job. So, yeah. So it shows that, well, okay, where was I going with this? Raja Koduri came back to AMD for a similar thing. His contribution was primarily, he was supposed to put the GPU division on track for a new architecture that would be competitive with NVIDIA. But the problem was they were kind of strapped for cash. And in order to simplify things and try to maintain a certain budget, they only developed one architecture to basically cover the entire product stack. And that architecture was GCN. And GCN, as you guys know, was very powerful at compute, but it was not that good at tessellation, at least compared to NVIDIA's equivalent cards at the time. And that's because NVIDIA was able to make two different architectures, one for the enterprise that had very good compute, and one for the gaming market, which was very good tessellation. AMD did not have enough money to do that. AMD could not design two different product stacks. So like Raja said, okay, we're going to build one, and it's going to do both. And that was GCN. So you had like literally one architecture that they sold in the professional market, and they sold it again in the gaming market. Now, where things got out of hand, and ultimately I think what got him fired, was he tried to simplify it too much with going with HBM. They invested heavily in HBM to kind of be competitive with NVIDIA in terms of memory bandwidth. But the problem with HBM is it was expensive. It was very expensive. So their profit margins on their GPUs were very low, especially their high-end ones like the R9 Fury, the R9 Fury X, and then later the Vega 64, the Vega 56, and then the Radeon 7. Although the Radeon 7 wasn't really his thing. So by going with HBM, they were able to stay competitive with NVIDIA to a degree, but they were never able to match NVIDIA. They were never able to go to push in front of NVIDIA, even despite using HBM. So that's where it was like, okay, now we actually need to change gears. So he did help them lay the groundwork for RDNA, and then they did RDNA 1, but he left the company before they launched their RDNA 1 products. So I think, if I remember correctly, Raja left AMD at the very end of 2017, which would have been after the Vega 64 and the 56 launch. That was the end of his time. So he did an okay job. I mean, let's put it this way: Raja did the best he could with the constraints that were imposed upon him. Namely, he was in a very fixed shoestring budget because AMD was expected to go bankrupt. See, a lot of people forget this. AMD was supposed to go bankrupt in 2019. They were supposed to file for Chapter 11 or whatever and disappear and go away. And that was the end. So you can imagine they didn't have a lot of money. So you can't design all the different GPU chips to your heart's content because you can't afford to pay people to design and test and build and then have to contract with TSMC or Global Foundries, which at the time AMD was still using Global Foundries because there was a whole clause because of the whole thing with, like, oh, they're the spinoff of AMD, so, they gotta partner with Global Foundries. So that was the other thing too. They were like kneecapped in so many ways. Like, you guys, the AMD story, for those of you that ever plan on like getting an MBA, a master's in business administration, like a master's degree, if you ever plan on doing that, I can tell you guys, I'm pretty sure that places like Harvard, probably Harvard Business Review, probably has academic research articles documenting the story of AMD's comeback, because this is like a classic MBA. Like, this is almost like a PhD dissertation sort of thing in terms of talking about how, like a case study, at the very least a case study on how a company literally came back from death because they were on the course to bankruptcy, and somehow Rory Reid gave them a map and said, hey, follow this map to get out of this and survive. Then he left. Lisa Su took the map and ran with it and basically got them out of that, and they didn't go bankrupt. As we know, they're here they are today, and they're very successful. But you guys have to remember, when Raja was there, they were supposed to go bankrupt by 2019. So, and he was there from like 2012 till 2017. He was there for like 5 years. His second time at AMD, because he was there before when they were ATI. That was a long time ago. So, and he laid the groundwork for the Navi architecture after he did, like, helped them with the GCN one. The GCN one was basically trying to maintain the best they could do with such a small budget. So it's, when you think about it, it's actually quite amazing. You know what I mean? Like, it's actually pretty amazing that they were able to compete against this massive GPU successful company, NVIDIA, and maintain the small percentage market share that they had through all those years of operating on a shoestring budget and potentially going bankrupt in like the next, before the end of the decade. So they managed to survive magically, And then the whole Ryzen thing, that was a huge success. So AMD is a very unique company because it is a company that it fights a war on two fronts. It's this small. If I think of like a Game of Thrones, to use a Game of Thrones scenario, AMD's like that one little country is caught between two giant empires that are constantly fighting each other for control of the technology market. So you got giant Intel and giant Nvidia, and then you have this little AMD, this third nation in the middle that's like stuck between these two. Because Intel and Nvidia, you guys don't really realize that those two are at war in the AI market. Nvidia dominates in AI. Intel wants in on that market. All this GPU stuff with Arc and Battle Mage, that's Intel's ticket into the market. And Intel does have those like encoder enterprise card things. I forgot what they're called, but they've got them now. So it's an ongoing thing. Like they were very threatened by Nvidia when Nvidia tried to buy ARM a few years ago, and it got blocked. And you can bet that Intel's lawyers lobbied to stop that because they're like, no. So it's literally like a Game of Thrones thing going on with these companies, like fighting each other behind the scenes. So, and then they'll partner with each other in weird ways, and then they'll stab each other in the back in other ways. So yeah, it's such a huge mess. But AMD is that interesting company because they're stuck fighting a war on two fronts, and they're much smaller than their opponents. So it's definitely the underdog, and it's an interesting story how they were able to come back from facing death, literally staring death in the face, and then somehow surviving. Didn't someone at the Radeon Group step down recently? Yeah, Scott Herkelman. Scott Herkelman was actually from NVIDIA. So he was actually from NVIDIA, and then he went to AMD. And then now, I don't know what he's doing now. He was the general manager of the Radeon Group. It'd be nice if EVGA could do the same. I don't really know what EVGA is doing. Like, I feel like that company's probably going to go out of business. See, it's tough when you're in that scenario because EVGA doesn't really have, like, they don't have a lot of IP. You know what I mean? AMD has a lot of patents, so they're able to stare death in the face and come back because they had a lot of like control over their own destiny because they make the thing that the technology industry revolves around, namely the CPU and the GPU. Whereas EVGA doesn't actually have that. When you think about EVGA is a reseller, so they're dependent on another company to do all the R&D into some component, basically a GPU, or maybe a power supply, and then they will resell it using their branding, using their marketing, their sales teams, their business-to-business partnerships with the retail market, and they may also do their own engineering if required. Like, for example, with the GPU coolers that they had on their GeForce cards. So, but other than that, they don't have a lot of control over the market because they're like that tier 2, tier 3 space. You have an EVGA 1300 watt. Oh. Yeah, see, that puts them in a tough spot. Yeah, so the funny thing is EVGA does make motherboards for both, but the thing is their AMD motherboards are so rare. My very first desktop was an EVGA motherboard for an AMD Athlon 64 processor. EVGA was doing cases. Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do, guys, because I feel like the main guy, the owner of the company, I don't think he plans on sticking around. And if like depending on how the company is managed at the top, I don't see them being around with it like within the next 10 years. So I don't know. Yeah. I feel like that mentality, because I remember when Steve Burke from Gamers Nexus covered that story a few years ago prior to the 40 series launch. I remember him saying something along the lines of the main guy at EVGA, I think he was the owner of the company, was like, at least I won't betray them. You know, that mentality, at first glance, it's like he's trying to sound like he's noble, but I mean, we're talking about a business thing here, right? Like, do you really think Nvidia would do the same thing? Like, you got to ask yourself, would Nvidia do the same thing? I don't think so. So it's like it's about survival. It's about survival. Like I honestly feel like EVGA easily could have pivoted. They could have started selling Intel or AMD GPUs. You know, like they could have done what XFX did, because XFX used to make only NVIDIA GPUs. Then NVIDIA was like, oh, well, I think XFX started making AMD ones, and NVIDIA was like, no, you're not allowed to do that anymore. So to me, that's kind of NVIDIA bullying the little guy, because the fact that NVIDIA allows Asus, Gigabyte, and MSI to sell GeForce cards, despite the fact that all three of them also sell AMD cards, and NVIDIA turns a blind eye. But yet, if a smaller company like XFX, when they tried to do that, NVIDIA was like, no, 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 you can't do that. So you're not allowed to sell GeForce anymore. You know, you broke the rule. Well, it's like, okay, was there actually a rule? You know what I mean? Like, okay. So, but the real reason is those other three companies are so much larger that they can get away with doing that. BFG. Oh yeah, man. Do you guys remember BFG? And also for the motherboards, remember A-Bit? You guys remember A-Bit? They were another motherboard manufacturer. You guys know Sapphire? Sapphire used to make motherboards too. I really wish Sapphire would make motherboards again. And Intel used to make motherboards. BFG used to make GeForce graphics cards. That was the same time when XFX made GeForce cards. Yeah. Yeah, the 2000s decade was a very interesting decade. If you were someone who liked computer parts throughout the 2000s, man, those were some good old times for the PC gaming. PC gaming in the 2000s. Basically, the PS2 and the PS3, well, yeah, the PS2 and the PS3 era, or the Xbox original and the GameCube, and then later the Wii and the Xbox 360. That whole decade, basically from the year 2000 to the year 2010, that was a good time to be a gamer, because you went from games that looked like Final Fantasy IX on the PlayStation 1 all the way to games like well, okay, let's put it another way. You went from like Tekken Tag Tournament on PS2, which is a PS2 launch title, all the way to Tekken 6 on PS3. So go look at like Tekken Tag, and then go look at Tekken 6. That is the difference in graphics fidelity. Like the difference between Tekken Tag, the first Tekken Tag, and Tekken 6 is like a bigger difference in graphics fidelity than Tekken 6 and Tekken 8. And Tekken 8 literally came out this year. So, like, we saw a bigger change in art direction, 3D graphics rendering, all that stuff in the 2000s decade than we did in this past decade. Like, no joke. I mean, I'm not saying like we didn't see graphical improvements. Obviously, in the last 10 years, there's been a lot of improvements. But I mean, the difference between like games still rendering 2D backgrounds with only 3D spatial based sprites to fully realized 3D environments by the end of the decade. Like that's the sort of difference that we're talking about. So if you were in the PC gaming space, like graphics cards and even CPUs changed so fast. So fast. Like if you had a GPU that was like 2 years old, like if you had a GPU from 2004, by the time it was like 2006 or 2007, your GPU was so bad. Like it's not like today. Today, someone can have a 3-year-old RTX 3080 and it's still going to be okay on the same monitor. You know what I mean? Like it's not, but if you had a GeForce FX50 600 or something, like that thing 2 years later, that thing's complete garbage. You know what I mean? So it's like, wow. Like, man, back then things changed a lot faster than they do now. At least in graphics technology. Someone with an Acer Nitro 5 and a 3050 trying to get them off of it and onto a Lenovo Legion. What does that have to do with what we were talking about? Acer laptop? What? So the chat is talking about something like completely different from what I've been talking about. Predator, Bifrost, AMD Radeon 7800 XT from Acer. Wait, Acer makes Radeon graphics cards? Hold on a second. Are you for real? What? Acer is planning to bring custom AMD Radeon to the market? We lost EVGA and gained Acer? Yeah, but the problem is Acer's not making GeForce cards. Are they making GeForce cards, or are they only making... I know they made Intel GPUs. Wait, Acer is making AMD cards? Seems Acer's... No, this right here says they're going to do 7900 level. This article from January 30th. Man, what is going on here? Wait, they're bringing that weird thing that has the blower style and the axial. It's got axial and radial in the same cooler. That must be an amazing cooler. The 7900 GRE is from Acer. Oh my god. What is going on here? This thing, is this good? Does anybody know? Like, I know this is on the Intel A770. Is this good? The BFG 9800 GTX. They're using a 3-fan design. Acer's calling some of their cards Nitro. Oh no. I mean, that's going to conflict with Sapphire, because Sapphire already has that. Well, Acer has the Nitro brand on the laptops. Oh yeah, this is old. This is 2023. Thanks for pointing that out. Here we go. This is from a few days ago. Acer unveils Predator Bifrost Radeon 7900 GRE. Oh, this is the one that Met was saying, the triple. Hey, look, they're smart. Oh, no, they're not smart. Never mind. Actually, this doesn't need triple fingers, though, because it's only the GRE. Like, if they were going to do XTX, they would need the 3 fingers. They can't go with the 2 fingers from Elden Ring. They got to go with the Frenzied Flame ending with that triple finger right there. If they're going to go with the XTX. Only people who played Elden Ring would have gotten that reference. The 2 fingers versus the 3 fingers. For those that don't know what I'm referring to, the bracket on the back of the GPU, notice how it has these 2 little pegs I like to refer to those as fingers. So a GPU can either have 1, 2, or 3 of those. So typically, the thicker the GPU, the more fingers it has. So, like for example, the RTX. Well, actually, let me show you guys here. I've got one here to show you. We can use this one as an example. This is the RTX 3090 Ti Founders Edition. And as you can see, it has 1, 2, 3 fingers. So I call this a 3-finger GPU. RTX 3090 Ti. It's a triple finger GPU. So the really fat, thick ones, they gotta have the 3 fingers. They gotta go for that frenzied flame. They gotta go for the frenzied flame. All my Elden Ring players in the chat know exactly what I'm talking about. They're probably like, wait, he made a reference. He used a Elden Ring analogy referring to GPUs? Like what? Acer Nitro 7800 XT. See, man, the 7800 XT, that GPU, it's still a good GPU, even though the 4070 Super is actually a pretty good GPU too. The 7800 XT, though, at the price point, is still really good. It's still really good. And if I only had a 1440p monitor, that's kind of the GPU that I would get. But because I play games at 4K, that's the reason why I don't have that GPU. Because somebody asked earlier, like, am I going to benchmark Dragon's Dogma with a 7800 XT? Well, the answer is no. The reason why it's no is because I played the game at 4K. So... the GRE overclocks better. Maybe that's because it has a wider area to dissipate the heat, and because it lacks the same amount of shaders that the fully enabled die has, the heat is able to be more evenly spread per surface area per shader. Maybe that's why. I don't know. That would be my assumption. If that statement's true. That would be the explanation as to why. It has 5120 shaders. Yeah, that's the same as the 6900 XT with a count that high. Wait, GRE was that much? Oh, wow. This thing has the same amount of shaders as a 6900 XT. Same bus, same memory. So wait a minute, how does this compare to a 69? Oh, okay. It's basically the same as a 6950 XT and an RTX 3080 Ti and 3090. And 4070 Super. Wait, 4070 Super, is that good? 4070 Super, is that good? Oh, well, they're all within 10%. So yeah, that makes sense. Interesting. So the XTX is about anywhere from 35 to 40% faster than the GRE. That is a pretty significant gap between the fully enabled die. But that one also is a 384-bit bus. GRE. Yeah. The GRE, how easy is it to get a GRE, though? I feel like these are kind of rare, aren't they? Like, my assumption was once retailers sell out of the GRE stock, they're not going to get replenished because there's not a whole lot of these. The ASRock Steel Legend is easy to get for $570. Yeah, see, I mean, that Guys, that is actually a really good deal when you think about that, because this thing is better than the 4070 Super, and at like 570, that's like less than the 4070 Super. And this thing is actually more, it's giving you more hardware, isn't it? Cuz like what is this? This thing is a 192-bit bus. 192-bit bus with 12 gigs. An 8104. 8104 is fine at that price point though. With this, it's like, I look at that kind of weird. Like, I can't see this aging that well because I feel like the amount of cache, like I feel like the bus width matters more in the long run as a GPU ages. Yeah, GRE around the 600 price point is probably the better deal. Ultimately, I think the GRE is the better deal. The This is 16 gigs also. Yeah, but see, the retail price of this is around like $500. So this one, this is still a good GPU though. Like, to be honest, guys, like if you have, like, what's the difference between this and a GRE? The difference between this and a GRE is 10%. Okay, so 10%. So it's like, okay, if this thing is like anywhere from 400, like if I could get one of these for 470, from the range of like 470 to like 520, I feel like this is still a good deal. The GRE is probably going to be like around 60, 70 to $100 more. Like Nero was saying, yeah, I agree. It's about 70 to $100 more. So it's like, is that increase in price worth the extra 10% when they both have 16 gigs and they both have 256-bit bus? Like, they're both 1440p graphics cards. So it's, as far as I'm concerned, so it's like, The difference is the ROPs though. Like, this thing has way more ROPs. It's a bigger die. It's going to use more power, but I don't think it uses that much more power. Like, what is this? What's the TDP on this thing? 260 watts versus what, like 230 or something? 260? What? They're the same TDP? That's weird. They have the same TDP? Man, that means this is like a heavily power limited Navi 31. No wonder it overclocks really good. This is like a super power limited Navi 31 if it has the same TDP as the 7800 XT. And it's only 10% faster even though it has like way more ROPs. That's weird. The problems is it like, I feel like this, once you go above 500, that's where you start breaking through the realm of sanity. Like, you know what I mean? I've always thought that $500 to $550 was maybe $600, but really like $500 is kind of the upper limit of what I would typically consider sanity. Like, for someone who is rational and sane, $500 is probably the ceiling of what they would spend on a graphics card. Anything above 500 or maybe 550, like 549, for example, that's kind of the upper limit, because once you get above that, you get into the memes of like PS3 with Kaz Hirai declaring it $599. You know what I mean? Like, you get into the realm of insanity. You basically lose your mind. You're hallucinating. Everything doesn't make any sense anymore because the pricing doesn't matter. Because it's like you just said, like it just starts upselling. Like all the GPUs that exist in that 600 to $900 or that 600 to 800, that $200 to $300 range, all those GPUs, I feel like all of them just sit there to upsell you to the next GPU. Like psychologically. Psychologically, they're messing with you. Like they're making you hallucinate and get confused because the rationality starts wearing off and the irrationality starts taking over. Because, and that's why, like the comment about the GRE, like, yeah, the GRE has better ray tracing. It has double L1. So yeah, it's more hardware for more money than the XT. But the thing is, now you're starting to get into the realm of insanity because why not go another $100 and get the XT? You know, the 7900 XT's there. You know, that thing's at like 700 something dollars. You know, like, now we're starting to look at the 4070 Ti Super level. Oh, but wait a minute, there's the XTX, you know, like at 1,000. It starts getting into that thing where it's like, oh, what's another $100? I'm already spending, you know, $700 plus. What's another $100, $200 at this point? Like that's because the thing is, here's the reason why that works. It works because as the price goes up, the percentage of the upsell increase is decreasing. You know what I mean? It's actually, the ratio is going down. The amount of money that is the upsell amount of the total price is becoming smaller and smaller as the total price goes up. That's the reason why it is much easier for your mind to trick itself into buying the more expensive card once you go beyond that $500 price point. Because there's a bunch of cards that literally sit there in a line trying to upsell you to the next one until you hit the very end of the list, which in this case is typically going to be the XTX or the 4080 Super. That's where the list ends. There's nothing else beyond those two. And people are going to be like, well, why are you saying that? There's the 4090. Okay, well, obviously there's a 4090. But the 4090 doesn't sit in the list, guys. Because it's like way out there beyond insanity levels of pricing. Like, you wouldn't even consider that. Like, that's like, you know, like, that's like somebody who is going to go buy a used car and somehow they're being convinced to go buy like a brand new Cadillac or a Lexus or some like super high-end, expensive, exotic cars. Like, what's going on here? You know, like it's not in the realm of sanity at that point. So the list ends at the XTX and the 4080 Super. They both sit at that $1,000, the end of the line, and it's like, that's it. So, yeah, all those, like, anywhere from, like, 600 to 1,000, that percentage of upsell starts going down, and that's the reason why they're able to trick you into buying the more expensive part. So, that's the reason why the price of this is still very relevant, because it's still that upper limit. And why is it the upper limit? Because what's the alternative gaming experience at $500? Well, the PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series X. The console market is the alternative. This thing teeters at the end of that price point. Anything beyond that is now, you know, like, doesn't really compute. Like, you know, like, people who have families, like if their kid asks them, Dad, can you get me an RTX 4090 for my birthday? Like, no one's gonna do that. You know, like, no responsible parent is going to do that. Even if they're like a millionaire, they're gonna question their kids' hobbies. They're gonna start wondering, like, what's going on here? You know, like, what are you doing with your life? You know what I'm saying? So it's like it starts questioning the person's intent and questioning their sanity. So that's the reason why the 7800 XT is still at its price point, it still makes sense despite the fact that the GRE is offering good value. And in a lot of, if you can find a really good deal on the GRE I think is still a really good value. I just don't know how many of those cards are going to exist. Like, do you really think we're going to be seeing 7800 GRE like a year from now? I don't know if those will still be on the market. I feel like those cards are basically like the HD 7870 LE, or was it the 7950 LE? What did they call that thing? This. Wasn't this? Yes, this one and this one. Yeah, there they are. Okay. The GRE. So, for those that have been following GPUs for over a decade now, you might remember that there was a card back in the day, back in 2012, there was a GPU called the Radeon HD 7870. This GPU was the fully unlocked Pitcairn die. This thing featured 32 ROPs, 2 gigs of VRAM, and 1280 shaders on a 256-bit bus. This was this in today's world is the 7800 XT. But they also released, for a limited time, they released a cut down variant of the larger die. The larger die was the Tahiti. So there was Tahiti and then there was the Pitcairn. Pitcairn, think of Pitcairn as like Navi 32, I think. Like, what's the, hold on. What is that thing called? Navi 32. Okay. Think of Pitcairn as Navi 32 and Tahiti is Navi 31. So this is not the first, like the GRE is not the first time AMD has done a limited run of a further cut down variant, because they did this literally in 2012. Yep, there we go. March 5th, 2012. This is the gigahertz, like the 7800 XT edition, or the equivalent. And this one is like a GRE. This one's the GRE because this one is the larger die, cut down, same amount of memory as the one that shares the same name, same bus width as the one that shares the same name, but the thing is, there were bigger Tahitis. There was a 7950 and a 7970. The 7970 is the fully unlocked Tahiti. This is basically a 7900 XTX. The 7950 would be a 7900 XT. So, this card in particular was kind of like the GRE because it was not easy to find. It was kind of a limited run. There were not a lot of these dies that were cut down this much. So it was kind of like a way for them to sell off the duds, I guess, of their 78 or their 7950 GPUs. So that's basically what the GRE is. So it's basically this sort of thing all over again. Once RDNA 4 hits, the GRE may disappear. Or it'll be gone by then. We'll see. The GRE is available even in Canada. Yeah, but remember, right now is not really like peak GPU buying season. So, I mean, GPUs are readily available right now, as far as I'm concerned. Like, it's not too hard to find any of these GPUs. $750 Super. Does AMD plan on doing anything with AI similar to NVIDIA's CUDA? Yes, look up ROCm. They already have that. There's a lot of effort right now, but it's all mostly on Linux. So, but the thing is, most people that are doing AI like LLM training, they are on Linux to begin with. But yeah, there are some people that are using Windows, but I feel like the vast majority of people that are in the software development space are using Linux. Even NVIDIA themselves said at GTC earlier this week that they leverage Red Hat. I think that's like their official supported one in terms of the OS. But yeah, look up ROCm, ROCm. It's been out for a while. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff too, like Microsoft's DirectML. Also is what AMD leverages on the Windows platform, but I think that's going to change ultimately because they are trying to move ROCm onto the Windows platform. The only hard one to find is yes, but see that's not the in the realm of sanity. Yeah, right here. ROCm. So what is this? This is normalized to OpenCL. Okay, so this is a Geekbench mark thing. But it's not necessarily a translation layer, but it allows you to run CUDA code. But yeah, they do have that. Um, if you read up on some of the stuff that I'm trying to remember what it was called. Like I know PyTorch. PyTorch now has a lot of libraries. I know there's been a lot of effort to build up the Radeon ecosystem, and it's not just AMD that's doing this. A lot of this is coming out naturally due to the fact that Nvidia has become the bottleneck when it comes to being able to gain access to the hardware, if that makes sense. Because the lead times for the AI, like Grace and Hopper and all those AI accelerators, the lead times are insane. So that's the reason why a lot of these software developers and a lot of these companies that are building these AI tools, these AI solutions, they want more than Nvidia because Nvidia they're not able to get enough Nvidia chips. So that's the reason why there's this big initiative now to build up the AMD ecosystem because they need a second supplier, like desperately. But see, like, okay, ROCm based solution to run unmodified NVIDIA's CUDA binaries on AMD graphics. So yeah, look up ROCm because I mean I don't know specifically what your use case is, but if you're just asking in general, the answer is AMD has ROCm. And it works very well on Linux. In fact, I have a video. I've used it on Linux. I haven't done anything with like AI apps in several months now, but last year I was doing stuff with ROCm on Ubuntu Linux. This was like last summer, I think, and I did a video showing it working on a 6900 XT. So and it's pretty fast. It's comparable to Nvidia. It's pretty much the same speed in terms of like image rendering. Because I think the demo that I did was Stable Diffusion using Automatic 1111 on Radeon, and it's just as fast as the 3090. So yeah, when using hip translation, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. All I know is that I ran it and it was fast. And I compared it to how it ran on Windows because so I've tested both. I've tested ROCm on Linux and I've tested Microsoft's DirectML on Windows with Radeon. And what I can tell you is ROCm Stable Diffusion using ROCm on Linux is on AMD is way faster than Stable Diffusion using Microsoft ML on Radeon on Windows. Looking to use an AMD card to train a computer vision model. Yeah, okay, then you're definitely going to want to look up the ROCm, because basically the whole idea is that you can use the CUDA binaries. You don't have to do all the brunt work or the grunt work of having to, write all that stuff manually. So, what's Ricky Bobby? What is that? What does that mean? I don't know who that is. I don't understand it. I didn't catch the reference. All right, but anyway, I think where are we at? We're at okay. So I think we're gonna probably. This is probably gonna be it for the stream. For this week in tech. There's not a whole lot. I'm gonna be doing a lot of live streaming of different games tomorrow and this weekend. So expect me to be streaming. I don't know which one I'll stream first. It's probably gonna be Dragon's Dogma, but I also can stream Rise of the Ronin and Horizon Forbidden West. I do need to finish Final Fantasy VII, but I am literally at the very end of the game. So I went and I played like 5 hours or something off stream to get caught up, and I thought I'd finish the game, but man, I had no idea like how long Final Fantasy VII is. That game is long. I'm approaching 80 hours in terms of my playtime. I'm currently at like 79 hours of playtime on Final Fantasy VII, and I'm still not done with the game. I'm on chapter 13, and there's 14 chapters. So I want to finish that game, but there's going to be a whole bunch of like Dragon's Dogma 2 hype, and Rise of the Ronin, and maybe Horizon Forbidden West on PC. So we'll see. I'm either going to stream on this computer, or I'm going to stream on the X3D computer instead, because maybe Dragon's Dogma benefits from the Vcache. So, do you mean Friday or Saturday? Because it's already Friday for me. Oh, well, yeah. Okay, so for you it's today. I mean Friday. But it'll probably be both. It'll probably be both days. There's going to be a lot of game streaming. So, and if you guys want to stop by and hang out and just ask random tech questions, whatever, like we always do, that's fine. What time? It'll be around the same time tomorrow. I might stream earlier. So, but you guys know the format, right? Like this show, the This Week in Tech is every Thursday evenings, and it's usually like 3 hours long. Sometimes it's up to 4 hours long, but usually we go for about 3 hours. We're almost at 3 hours now. Okay. Well, okay, regardless though, I'll be streaming tomorrow and probably Saturday and or Sunday, one or the other or both. But just check with if you're subscribed to the channel and you hit the notification bell, you'll know when I'm live. So, if you're not subscribed to the channel, you guys subscribe. I recognize a lot of the names in here, so I know you guys are subscribed. Or I assume you're subscribed, or I hope you're subscribed. But I'm not gonna nag you guys to subscribe. I don't want to be that guy that has the thing in every video. Hit that thumbs up, like the video, sub to the channel, hit that notification. Because I feel like if you guys like the content, you'll do that naturally. So I'm not gonna nag you guys. So anyway, that's gonna be it for this stream. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and I will catch you guys next Thursday on This Week in Tech. And if you're stopping by the channel tomorrow, we will be live with Dragon's Dogma 2, maybe Rise of the Ronin, or maybe all of the above. But regardless, I'll see you guys then. Have a good night, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.